Hey guys, welcome back to WCC. It's Derick again with a deck doctor, this time on Nubatama. We are changing a standard deck to a premium deck, nothing too fancy here, so we're just gonna get straight into it. Alright, so for the grade 3s, we're currently running Magatsu Storm, Voidmaster, and Kujikiri Kongo. Now, going into premium, these three grade 3s are actually quite formidable. Now, this deck, I'm going to focus more on Kujikiri Kongo. So let me just remove these. So we're going to add in a fourth Kujikiri Kongo. And then put in 4 crows. And then I'm going to select Magatsu Storm as, I guess, a 9th grade 3. So my reasoning for Kujikiri Kongo is that it works well with Dreadmaster to focus on hand drop. Now Crow is there because of the drop 5. Pretty sure most people know about that combo. But that one Magatsu Storm is to sustain against the current meta. Ichikushima is one of the strongest, or if not the strongest deck in the current format. Ichikushima blocks out Sentinels, but if Magatsu Storm is your Vanguard, he can pretty much perfect guard one of Ichikushima's attacks. Optionally, you can change out Kujikiri Kongo for more Magatsu Storm, or even like you could probably swap it out for Voidmaster if you want to play a bit more lockdown. So if you Rene and you know your opponent's probably going to call a grade 2 to rearguard, you can stop their intercepts, which makes it so that they have 2 less cards to guard with. But I think I'm going to focus more on Kujikiri Kongo just because I want to focus more on hand drop. In the meta at the moment, you don't want to play a long game because most decks kill you either on first or second stride. So Kujikiri Kongo, if you ride up first, you at least get a discard, and then with Dreadmaster, you get an additional discard, and that's pretty much what you want in the current format. For the grade 2s, I'm going to take out 1 Tsunomasa and 2 Dam Breach. For 3 Heat Elemental Bobo. There is actually quite a few reasons why I change those 3 cards for Heat Elemental Bobo. Now, if your opponent has no early game and you want to rush them, you push them to high damage because Rene is quite lethal. But then, because you burn all your counterblast, your opponent will swing your rear guards and is able to ride up to grade 3 without any problems, without needing to care about going into Rene turn because you don't have any counterblast. But you now have Heat Elemental Bobo, which unlocks that for you. So even if your opponent gives you no counterblast, Heat Elemental Bobo can unlock that, which makes your Rene turn really lethal after rushing so many turns. Tsunomasa is a really good grade 2 in this format. Well, especially in this deck anyways. It's to fuel for Crow, as well as to play the early game. Giving one of your units 3k can allow you to bash over 10k bases, and even those decks that play 12k bases like OTT, playing that vanilla grade 2, Tsunomasa fixes your numbers. And Magatsu Gale is just a solid grade 2. You can drop triggers to boost, and then at the end of battle, you can put Magatsu Gale into Soul, and then pretty much bounce that card back to hand. And he refunds his own costs, so you don't actually minus, which is superb. For the grade 1s, we're going to take out 4 Magatsu Breath, and then add a few grade 1s. So my choices here are the Stride Fodder, Harnley, and Mistfrog. So Stride Fodder is Stride Fodder. It's there because you kind of don't want to ditch your grade 3s. Harnley makes the Excel matchup a little bit more bearable. It's still pretty bad just because of the nature of Protect versus Excel. But Harnley just cuts that down just that bit more so that the deck sustains well. And then Mistfrog, it's for your first stride. If you go into Rename when your opponent rides up first and they decide to drop triggers, Mistfrog can go into Soul, give that trigger an extra 6k to be able to hit their own Vanguard. Optionally, you could probably take out the 2 Miss Frogs for 1 more Stride Fodder and 1 more Honolly if you really want to. There's not really much, I guess, in the Grade 1 selection for Nubatama in the V series, other than these 2. But Dreadmaster, it's just there like as a really good cycle card, as well as Sakura Fubuki. It's your countercharge engine. So this deck isn't really resource heavy other than the Soul, especially using Crow. Very unlikely to use Crow twice in a game, but with Tsunomasa, you can definitely do that. If you keep rewriting over, you can definitely do that. But I don't think I've had an instance where I've crowed twice. But I mean, with the addition of Heat Elemental Bobo, it might actually be possible that you could do it twice. For the triggers, 4 heals, 4 draws, 6 crit, and the 2 additional draws. In this deck, I'm going to take out 2 crits and then add in 2 more draws. So a few reasons why to, I guess, bump up the draw count is you want to draw into your Sentinels and Dreadmaster. So Dreadmaster with Kujikiri Kongo pretty much allows for hand drop. Also, it allows you to draw into your combo pieces like Magatsu Gale for the early game, Crow, and Miss Frog even if you're going to Stride first. In an Excel matchup, it's a 10k trigger, so it makes it a lot more significant going into your opponent's battle phase. But yeah, like 8 draws is not as bad as people think. With the 8 draws, you can draw into Dreadmaster. Dreadmaster cycles for your grade 3s so that you pretty much don't have the G assist. And that is so important because if you get stuck on 1 grade and in this format, your opponent, rides up to grade 3 and you search for your grade 3 and you can't ride, oh man, you're in a really rough spot. And pretty much they stride and then they just bash you right out of the game. So it's super important to get all your pieces to cycle through your cards and to make sure that riding is there. As you can see, this deck, it's quite cheap to make in terms of funds. Like Kujikiri Kongo is like a 50-cent card. Magatsu Storm is like an $8 VR. Magatsu Gale is like $5. Bobo is found in the premium collection as a box topper, same with Honolly. Stride Fighters come from the Revival collection. And like the only thing you need to look for is Miss Frog. And Miss Frog is a common. So that's like super easy to make. So if you ever feel that you want to jump into premium, Nubatama is one of those type of decks. But obviously you can't just play this deck without the part that makes a premium deck, which is strides. So for Rene, Nubatama's #1 stride. It's been there for so long. It's been oppressive back then, and it is still now. Dropping 2 cards is amazing with 15k 1 crit. Just an amazing card. Magutenbu. He's one of those late game cards where you run out of Rene and then they have 1 card on the board and you can pretty much bump that up super high. He's just there for an extra stride if you ever need it, but I haven't gone into the situation where I needed to go into Magutenbu. Mukuro, just a board wipe, can be found in the Revival collection, so easy to access. Honestly saying, he could probably be swapped out for one of the other cards I'm going to discuss next, which is Sukumura-kan. Now, going into VBT05 with the Jamio Kongo being pretty much a Sukumura-kan if you have a grade 3 in Soul, there's not really a need for that. So you can probably swap it out for another one for the meantime, but Sukumura-kan at 1, I don't think I've ever gone into it twice. I mean, you can swap it out now if you want, but once Jamio Kongo comes out, like these 2 cards, this card in particular is pretty redundant because your grade 3 Vanguard pretty much drops them to 4 already. So we have one of the trial deck stride. So for example, in the instance where you don't draw into your Bobo and your opponent gives you 0 damage, you at least still have a stride you can go into. I know Bobo is a really good card, but there are there are those times where you cycle through Dreadmaster, Magatsu, Gale, and you just don't get Bobo. This guy just makes things a bit more sustainable. And if your opponent tries to stall out or not bash your Vanguard because they're scared of Rene and they're just attacking your rear guards while you're amplifying, offense, this guy just continues that without any counterblast cost. So because you run this guy, you can opt to not play Bobo and play something else. You could probably bump it up for another Tsunomasa and then put in 2 of the grade 2 that retires when a dominated unit attacks, Saratsugu. And you're in happy days because it's a free card. And in this format, the damage is pretty friendly. There's no OTT Gize. It's pretty sustainable in terms of damage and resource. Drakma, he's just there for shine. Nothing too much there. You could probably take this out for the Progenitor Dragon if you want to free stride, but I don't feel that you need that because you have cards that can drop cards from hand. The reason I would probably take this out for the Progenitor Dragon is if you verse Protect and they have Protect 1 in their hand, Rene's pretty redundant because they're gonna choose the Protect 1 to call, but because they can't call, Rene's effect pretty much gets nulled out. So Progenitor Dragon into a first stride to continually get, free stride, it's really good without having to ditch card from your hand. And then if you have that only that one grade 3 in your hand where you can ride and get a Protect to force out a Crow, you can ride the grade 3, grab the Protect, and then Crow without having to ditch a card from your hand to stride, which is, the only purpose I would say for the Progenitor Dragon, but yeah, people can say otherwise. So G-Guards, one of this Revival Collection G-Guards, Shikihime, one of the prettiest G-Guards Nubatama has, if not the prettiest. It's just there for big shield. Later in the game, you can force your opponent to discard cards. Nothing much to say there. Now Nubatama's, one good G-Guard, the one that can pretty much steal your opponent's boosters. You can disrupt their battle phase tactics, and it's just there to make your opponent's future attacks weaker. If your opponent is setting up for, a third attack, so they attack with one of their rear guards, and then they attack with their vanguard, and they're inexperienced, and they leave a grade 1 booster behind the last attack that you have to guard. You steal that last one, or you steal that grade 1 from the last attack, and then which makes the last attack weaker. And that is actually quite game-changing because obviously this deck doesn't really generate enough hand. It's okay, and especially ditching 2 Sentinels with the Crow, you don't have that much hand in comparison to Ichikishima, Bermuda. This deck doesn't just draw 14, 17 card hands. So this card is actually really useful, hence why I'm running it at 2. There are builds that run it at 1, and I feel that 1 sometimes might not be enough. But yeah, it's the only Nubatama G-Guard that I would probably run more than 1 of. So following from that, I only run 1 of this big shield guy. Nubatama's G-Guards, there isn't that much selection. It's all pretty jank. There aren't quality G-Guards. For example, if you look at Royal Paladin, they have Marin, and Marin, pretty much you can run 2, 3 of those, even 4 of those. It just cycles through your deck thins, and has high shield value for pretty much no cost. But Nubatama kind of doesn't have that, which is why I'm running 2 Cray Elementals. So Ractome just to ditch and draw into your pieces, and Colburn if you verse Ichigishima or Bermuda and they have big hand, this guy works miracles. Now, just talking about matchups in this format, so I'm going to talk about Ichi, Ezel, DI, Bermuda, and Neonectar. So Ichigishima, it's probably the hardest matchup for any deck, and it's hard because the new Ichigishima from the premium collection is so broken. Like it forces your opponent not to perfect guard, and because they have critical tactics to check top deck for a crit, put crits on top through Tetramagus, it's just so hard. But that's where I feel that you could probably opt to run more Magatsu Storm, just to guard one of their attacks efficiently and then manual guard the other one. But in this case, you kind of don't want to like stall your engine far enough into the late game because there's really no late game. But yeah, Magatsu Storm does really help in this matchup. So, I mean, if you feel like you want to run more of that guy, you can definitely run more. I'd take out Kujikiri Kongo. Definitely an option. But because perfect guards aren't really used in that matchup because of Premium Collection Ichikishima, and because we're running grade 0 nulls, it doesn't matter anyways. Into either Ichikishima doesn't matter. So Crow using those perfect guards because they're useless anyways, it's still okay, but it's still a hard matchup in terms of the way you guard. Nothing more to say there. In regards to Ezel doesn't really have much hand, but the only problem is before Spearex came out, Nubatama did well into Ezel because they had no way of calling from deck, but because they have Spearex now, they can +2 just straight out by Soul Blasting 1, which makes their board more stable. So Crow isn't as effective as it was before because Gold Paladin now has more cards on the board while still sustaining hand. It's still quite rough for them, especially if you Crow them first, then Rene. With 15k 1 crit, it forces them to guard. But just out of nature of Ezel, they don't really have that much hand. So you can probably do that and steal games. And yeah, it's Ezel. If they high roll you, you still die. And that's pretty much with every deck. So you don't need to worry about Ezel going first. It's more about sustaining and playing the game with Ezel that matters. DI, no real early game scene for DI, unfortunately, except with the new Yellow Bolt that got revealed a few days ago. But yeah, DI is just in a really rough spot. And this deck, because it has an average grade 2 game, definitely better than DI, you can actually contest and first stride Rene, and that might just be enough to get through. But you need to remember that if you ever give Dark Irregulars first stride, they go into Castile with Doreen the Thruster, pretty much you're out of the game. And that applies to pretty much every deck. Like if DI goes into Castile, loops a few times, Master Fifth Element, restands 2 Doreens, sack stands, yeah, you're pretty much done. So you just need to be really careful on DI. Don't give them first stride, or at least cripple them to a stage where their first stride isn't as good as it's supposed to be. Bermuda, little bit annoying with Citron, because if you Rene and they Citron over one of the dominated cards, it doesn't actually attack. But the main problem against Bermuda is that it ramps real good with big multi-attacks, and it really hurts this deck a lot because this deck doesn't generate hand. And that's probably one of the biggest weaknesses to this deck. Because it can't generate hand, it can't guard efficiently. And it needs hand to use their combos, like with Crow. It's pretty hard. And which is why I opt for 8 draws, just because you need to sustain. Now, Neonectar is a really funny one. So Crow immediately kills tokens so that your opponent minuses more than they have to. And because you Crow returns the tokens into hand. Because tokens can't return to hand, it actually disappears back to wherever you keep them, in the gift zone, whatever. So you, for example, if Neonectar has 3 legitimate cards and like 2 tokens, you bounce those 3 cards, you make those tokens disappear, as well as force your opponent to discard 2. The only problem this deck runs into is Neonectar's grade 2 game. Like, Neonectar has an amazing grade 2 game, probably as good as Luard, Ichikishima, but yeah, this deck just dies to its grade 2 game. So first striding is nearly impossible, and because they multi-attack on their first stride, this deck has a really hard time. So overall, like, I think this deck is more of a casual deck now than it was, say, a few sets before when Ezel ruled the meta, Ange ruled the meta. This deck isn't as good as it used to be. The gimmick's still there. I think the gimmick's pretty cool. Ditch 2 Sentinels to discard 5. Yeah, it's pretty good. Like, I would say the 5 decks I explained before is just better in terms of consistency, grade 2 game, stride power. It ramps this deck. But if you ever feel you want to get into premium, this is one of those decks where you can just pick it up, and then it's not that bad into the meta. It's a pretty good team format deck, especially if you're bringing Ishigashima and Ezel. Maybe you're missing that third deck, and this might be that third deck. So maybe come next year when the VBT05 comes out with Jamio Congo, this deck might come back. I would need to test, we would need to test, but the deck is quite good with Jamio Congo, well, at least on paper it does. But yeah, this deck is cheap. Kuchikiri Congo, again, is dirt cheap. Most of the cards in this deck are dirt cheap. Like, Rene would be the only card rising in price because obviously Jamio Congo is a Sukumura Khan, and Rene with a Sukumura Khan every turn from second ride onwards is lethal. With 15k1 crit, it's just disgusting. So yeah, if you have a Nubatama standard deck, definitely pick this up. If you want to get into premium, this is one of the decks where you can just change straight from standard to premium. But yeah, if you have any suggestions for decks that you want to convert from standard to premium, definitely hit us up in the comments. I'll take all suggestions, even if they are some whack suggestions. I know one of our members are running a Pelennor deck, so I might hit that one up soon. But yeah, this is Derick from WCC, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.